Welcome back to the Recovery Rebellion podcast. My name is Tara. I go by Burn the Stigma on social media. And today we're talking about one of the biggest and deepest pieces of recovery culture. And it's also one of my biggest icks, I guess, for lack of a better word, the disease model and how it's not the universal truth that you were taught it is. So let's start with the basics, okay? If you ever have been to treatment, therapy, recovery meetings, jail, if you just Google addiction, you're going to see that addiction is a disease and that you'll have it for life, right? And if you're ever in any of these places and you questioned it, you were told you were in denial, you were told you were minimizing it, you were told, oh, well, maybe you're not a real addict then. But the truth is, okay, the disease model is not fact, okay? It is a model, it is a narrative, it is a theory, it is one framework. It is not the definitive of what substance use disorder is, right? I mean, even the name substance use disorder is not called substance use disease. So where did it come from, right? Like, how did we get here? So the disease model was popularized in the 1940s, and there was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, Marty Mann, who really helped to make it popular. I'm going to use their language, alcoholism, to be recognized as a disease. She worked with scientists, she worked with policymakers, and worked with the media. She even launched what would become the National Council on Alcoholism. But this is the thing, though. Even though she was working with the scientists, and we'll get into this another time, but they didn't have the scientific proof that they should have had to be on this campaign, to be advocating for it so hard as a disease, right? But the goal wasn't primarily about scientific truth. It was about getting people access to care. At the time, people who drank, I mean, honestly, there's still people who believe this now, that people who drank were seen as immoral, lazy, weak. So labeling substance use disorder as a disease was a way to help soften public judgment, and it was a way to make insurance companies pay for treatment, right? It opened the doors for funding. So in that context, the disease model, I see the vision, right? Like, it makes sense. It opened doors that had been slammed shut. So I'm not going to say it didn't help anyone. It did. It has. But the problem is that these short-term survival strategies aren't always a good long-term foundation. And labeling substance use disorder as a chronic, progressive, incurable disease has created new problems, deep problems that we're dealing with today. It's locked people into this lifetime identity that they'll never fully heal. They'll always be in recovery. Even people who are fully healed are still taught to call themselves in recovery. It's like the idea of being sure of yourself is seen as a bad thing. And it cemented abstinence as the only acceptable outcome, because if you have this disease, you can't ever touch another substance again. Like, there's no gray areas. It's very black and white, right? And it's completely disconnected substance use from trauma, from environment, from mental health, from social conditions, which are all very important parts of substance use disorder. It's like taught the world to fear people who use drugs, right? If you have this incurable brain disease, you're unpredictable, you're dangerous, and you're someone to be managed. You're not someone to be understood. Labeling substance use disorder as a disease, it didn't erase stigma. It just changed it. We became sick people who could never be trusted instead of being bad people who could never be trusted. Instead of being seen as humans with context, we are boxed into patients with incurable diseases. Traded one dehumanization for another. And the worst part is that people internalize that story. Like, people who go through substance use disorder and come out on the other side have built their entire identities around being in recovery and never being fully healed because they think their life depends on it, right? And that's why I say, and will always say, that labeling substance use disorder may have helped a few, but it has harmed generations. Like, I really feel that it has done more harm than good, because when you say, okay, well, it's gotten people access to treatment, that's a good thing in some ways, but in other ways, I mean, getting into the revolving door of treatment where these ideas of having this forever disease get cemented into people's heads to where they think they're never going to get better, where one slip, they've thrown everything away. Like, all of these things we know are super dangerous and don't meet people where they're at and don't make sense for a majority of people. Has more access to treatment been a good thing? I mean, I don't know, every person is going to have their own opinion on that. The data, I mean, we'll take a look at that one day. We'll have a discussion about it. But, you can get to 20 years without any problem, and still, in the eyes of the disease framework, you're just one bad day away from losing everything and being off to the races. Right? The disease narrative teaches people to fear themselves, and it almost teaches them that like they're almost like a ticking time bomb if they're not very rigid with their recovery. The way that it's framed, that they only have this daily reprieve, can be really scary for people like myself who aren't really good with staying on a routine and staying consistent with things. Like, I know for myself, when I would fall off on my prayer and meditation, I'd be like, oh my God, like my disease is going to get me. This is going to be so bad. So that in itself, it's just everybody's different. That's the thing. Everybody is different. And what may be helpful for some is not helpful for others, and can send other people into a spiral, into a place that we're not trying to go with recovery, just because we're trying to put people in this one box. I just hate that it gives people that they can't ever feel like, there's people who feel like they're never gonna be fully healed, right? And like, you hear them say like, oh, I'm glad it always keeps me, working on myself and aspiring. But at the same time, like, being on the other side, like, used to think like that, like, oh, like it's a gift. People don't work on themselves the way that people in recovery do. Now, like, being on the other side and knowing that I'm healed from my substance use disorder, there's so much more peace there. There's so much more peace that I don't have to think or worry about, am I spiritually fit enough to be with defense against using, There's other ways to understand substance use and substance use disorder. There's the trauma model. Maybe you weren't born that way. Maybe you are coping with pain that you never figured out how to deal with, right? The learning model. Maybe your brain just adapted to what it was exposed to and it was just learned, and it can be unlearned. There's the psychosocial model. Or maybe your environment, maybe poverty, maybe isolation, oppression, whatever, just had more to do with it than some hidden gene or some spiritual sickness, right? In the end, in reality, substance use disorder is complex. It's complex, okay? It's biological, it's physiological, it's emotional, it's social, it's cultural, and it's human. People have been altering their state of mind for a very, very, very long time. A lot of people believe it is a disease. Like, that's what you're told in treatment. That's what you're told in a lot of places. When you're only given the disease model, you stop asking questions and you start shaping your entire identity around a diagnosis that may not be, there's certain things of the disease model that may fit you, but there's other things that you could be doing to help yourself, but you're not doing those things because you're convinced this is your disease. And that can keep you stuck. If you believe the disease model is your story, you might miss the chance to heal in ways that actually heal you and make sense for you. When you believe this stuff, you may be internalizing shame that was never yours to carry. You might limit your own growth because someone told you the ceiling was that you are going to have this disease forever, right? Healing isn't one size fits all. Recovery isn't just about following this one script for everybody. Everybody is different. It's about finding what works for you and being brave enough to leave behind what doesn't work for you. If you have never thought about substance use disorder beyond the disease model, I want you to explore that idea a little bit. You were never defective. You were adapting. You were surviving. And you're allowed to grow past survival. You've never been too broken to fully heal. You were just taught to believe that you were. and it's time to take your power back. I might do this with some of the episodes. I have a little journal prompt if you want to journal about this after today's episode. So the prompt is take 5 minutes and journal this. When I think about the idea that I'm not broken forever, what feelings come up for me? Hope, doubt, fear, relief. There are no wrong answers. Just notice it. All right, guys, until next time. Bye.